Michael, thank you so much for joining me. Lovely to see you.
Maria, lovely to see you as well.
Fantastic. So, listen, I introduced you in the introduction, and I've known you for a while as Michael Anderson. However, you go by the name of R. Michael Anderson, which is actually a very American thing to do, isn't it? To put an initial at the beginning or in the middle. Talk to me about the R. What does the R stand for?
Well, of course, there's a story behind that. So I was a couple years into my speaking career, and there was an event in New Orleans. And so when I went to sign in as a speaker, there was somebody there, and he said, "Are you Michael Anderson?" I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Are you a serial killer?" I'm like, "I don't think so, but why are you asking me that question?" He said, well, he was joking. He said, "Well, I Googled you, Michael Anderson, and a serial killer came up first." And so I thought at that time I was a pretty, hot name out there. And so I anonymously Googled myself, where Google doesn't like know who you are. And I was on like the sixth or seventh page. I couldn't find myself. And where I grew up in the States, Pennsylvania, Michael was the most common first name and Anderson was the most common surname. So I have a really, really common non-Googleable name. And my Michael's actually my middle name. Robert is my first name. And I figured if I put my first initial, I'll sound a little more important. So that's why I go by R. Michael Anderson. So I'm Googleable, and it just adds a little bit of uniqueness to my otherwise common name.
Robert, that's interesting. And also, we've got something in common actually, because if you Google Maria Franzoni, there is a Maria Franzoni in Italy who was tried for murdering her child. So, hey, I know it gives me goosebumps when I think about it. I do come up though on Google as well. And fortunately, we don't look alike. But yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Obviously, anyway, it's not a good thing to have in common, Michael. So tell me, how did you end up here? Most of us want to go to California, and you've come from California to the UK. Why have you done it that way around?
Well, I was here on a speaking tour, and I actually was on Tinder, and I met this lovely British woman, and we fell in love. And we had an international long distance relationship, which was really cool at the beginning, but then it got a little bit expensive and difficult. And she said, "Why don't you come over?" I live in Hazelmere near Guildford in Surrey. And she goes, "Why don't you come over here?" I'm like, "How's the weather?" She's like, "It doesn't rain here that much." And so I believed her, but she's worth it. She's an amazing woman. And I love being in the UK. It's my new home. Yes.
That's fantastic. It doesn't rain here that much. I love it. It doesn't get hot here that much either. But anyway, welcome. How are you coping with British English and the differences between the UK and the US?
Well, British people are amazing because they always point out all the different words that I use. And I think a lot of us have saw, there was a British comedian, I can't remember his name, but he talked about the difference between British English and American English. We're very specific, like a waste paper basket instead of the bin. And we always like to call it exactly what it is. And so that's, and I have a stepson who goes to his dad's house, once a week, once every 2 weeks. And I think he brings the American slang in there. And I think it drives his dad crazy. So it's fun. It's just another thing to talk about.
Fantastic. Well, listen, let's talk about leadership. That's your area. And that's your area that you speak about, that you write about, that people ask you to help them with. Were you a good leader?
Well, I tell people that's why I know a lot about leadership because I was not a good leader. I started as a programmer. I worked my way up the corporate ladder. I started my first company, software company in California. All of a sudden, there was a gap in the marketplace. Then all of a sudden, I had a staff. All of a sudden, I had offices. I had to deal with attorneys. I had to deal with banks. And I realized I was not a good leader. I didn't have a great culture. I didn't even know really what a culture was or how to make that. I didn't know how to get the most out of my team. I thought what a leader was just somebody who got a bunch of to-dos in, would give them out to his staff. And if they didn't get them done as quick or as well as they thought, I would just get angry and frustrated. And of course, that caused a lot of issues. Business wise, I knew if I wanted to reach my goals, I had to really figure this thing out. It was causing a lot of stress for me emotionally and mentally. And I see so many other managers and executives and leaders going through the same thing. And there's a lot of training out there, but it's management training, and it's And I know there's a lot of great speakers if you're maybe in the military or flew a fighter jet. That's really cool to hear about leadership, but it's a lot different in the corporate environment. And so for me, I realized to reach my goals personally and professionally, I had to learn about leadership. So I got really amazing coaches. I got coached by the best in the business. I took a lot of training classes, and I also earned a master's degree in psychology as well as a neuroscience certificate, because I really like to figure out what makes me tick, what makes other people tick. And so I must have figured something out, because my companies, at one point I owned 3 software companies. They started to thrive. We were on the Inc. 5000 list. We were voted the #1 best place to work, and I was Social Entrepreneur of the Year. That was externally, but internally, I was finally having fun, because up until then, leadership was just this one big ball of stress and negative self-talk and worry and responsibility. And then once I started to get it as it is, I was creating value for our customers. My employees were growing as people, and it was a fun place to work, and we were giving back to the community. And some of my friends in California saw what I was doing, so they said, "Hey, I saw how you're showing up as a leader now, Mike, and what your companies are doing. Can you teach me and train me?" And so I shifted my career into what I'm doing now, and helping other leaders get the same tools and skills that I learned.
Fantastic. There's so many questions from that answer I've got for you now. That's fantastic. So first of all, I mean, the one that strikes me, and I wrote down immediately, you had fun as a leader. I mean, surely, especially currently, I mean, at the time of recording, we're probably about to go into a second lockdown. I mean, I think it's quite imminent. We're living in a pandemic. We're in a global recession. How can leadership possibly be fun?
Well, yeah, and we have to be careful, Maria, when we use the word fun in leadership, especially at times like this. But I think that, to me, I love what I do so much, because the people that change the world, they used to be activists or even politicians, but the people that change the world now are leaders. And if you are a leader, even if you're a middle manager or senior exec at a smaller company, you're a leader. You're a leader to your team. You're a leader to your family. You're a leader to your friends. And when this pandemic hit and this lockdown hit, whether you realize it or not, they look to you. They look to see how you handle it. They look to see your language, your body language. All these different things are so important. And what it's important for all of us leaders to do is really to show up strong and to show up positive. And you're right, this might not be the fun time for leaders, but it's maybe, if you're a business leader out there, this might be the most crucial time in your whole career to show up the right way. And this could even mean if you're unemployed or you're furloughed, because you have to be strong. You have to be strong for the people around you. And I'll tell you, this is where this is the time that people define their characters by how they show up in difficult times, because anybody can be a leader when things are good. And so to me, it's important for me and the other leaders out there to connect with all the other leaders, to really give them any tools, mindset shifts, habits, whatever we can, so that we really carry the positivity through this time.
I love that. I love that. Show up in the right way. That's so good. That's so important. And actually, it's quite simple, isn't it? You've just got to do that, and do that for others, but also for yourself. I think that's really, really powerful. You mentioned that you studied psychology, and in fact, I believe it was spiritual psychology. How has that helped you as a leader and in your work?
Yeah, just to clarify that, because I do start with psychology, and then once I get a little relationship, I drop the spiritual on them, and and when I say spiritual psychology, there's nothing to do with religion. It's the psychology. We learn 6 different psychoanalysis techniques, but we learn it from a place of pure love and compassion. We take the assumption that if people that are behaving, through maybe a state of fear or anger or whatever it is, that's just because they have some psychological unresolved issues. So we use psychology to clear that up, so they're more in line with their true self. So maybe we move them, you could say, from their ego into a more authentic place, which is really necessary with leadership. Because I realized that when I first started as a leader, I was very insecure, because I didn't know myself yet. I had some great mentors in my life, but I was trying to mirror what they did. And the more I learned about myself, and the spiritual psychology, really made me understand myself, not just understand myself, but trust myself, so that I could start showing up in my values and secure and confident. Because if you look at leaders out there, there's never been an insecure leader that people say, oh my gosh, I want to follow that person. People want you to be confident. I'm not talking about arrogance, but if you have arrogance here and you have shyness here, there's this beautiful confidence in the middle. And confidence normally comes with a quiet confidence. Both arrogance and shyness are born out of insecurity or ego. But when people are confident, and confident also doesn't mean that you have to know all the answers, but that you and your team are going to get there. And again, when we're going through this lockdown and COVID, there's so much uncertainty, but people want to know that you have it covered, that if they're on your team, you're going to get them to the end. And that, I think, is really important. And the spiritual psychology made me have confidence in myself that even though I don't know the path out, that we're going to figure it out. And that's, again, I teach a lot about mindset and about resilience and about psychology, so that leaders can have that resilience, have that confidence, have that presence, have that motivation and inspiration that teams are really clamoring for.
While you were talking about that, I was remembering about people that I've worked for who have been leaders, and I get exactly what you mean. That quiet confidence, the fact that I can totally trust that they've got it covered, as you said. It's a very American expression, but actually, when you've got it, I don't know what the English equivalent is, but you've got it covered is a good way of saying it. I like that. So tell me, your background obviously is software technology. That's what you know, and you do tend to work with a lot of technology leaders because obviously you understand them and understand what they go through. Do you think that leaders in the tech space are different from any other kind of leaders? Do they face different challenges, or is it always the same sort of problems?
Yeah, I mean, there are some subtleties that are really important to highlight, because often in technology organizations, the leaders have come from an engineering background, which means they're very analytical, and they don't have a lot of the soft skills. And if some of the trainers out there, if they're too bubbly or they're too emotive, sometimes that freaks the very analytical people out, so they don't get that connection. They're not talking the same language. Often people in technology, they're younger, things move much quicker. And you have to adapt, and oftentimes the workforce needs to be inspired and motivated in a different way. And so there are a lot of those subtle differences that make technology leadership. Also, you might go through hypergrowth. You might really go through a big scaling up phase, which takes a whole different type of leadership and a whole different type of tools and skills to really do a proper scale up.
Okay, so you've mentioned growth, and I want to pick up on that with you because I know that you, in time of recession, have actually grown your companies. I mean, to scale, you've really hyper grown them, if you like. And we're now in a global recession. Can we grow now in this particular type of environment, or is this recession different? Is it the same? Give us some advice. I want to know how to grow.
Well, I've been through a lot. I've been through a lot of hard times. I've been through. I was through 9/11. I worked for a U.S. software company in 9/11. And 9/11 was more difficult because it stopped the next day with no warning. It was boom, and that was, there was such the emotion around that as well. I also had a really nasty business lawsuit, which was a real difficult time for my organization. And then I went through the Great Recession. And I learned things through the first two trials about myself as a leader, about how to set my organization up for success through these difficult times. And you're right, Maria, through the Great Recession, we actually doubled in revenue and doubled in profit. And there's a lot about and I've done some training on this for organizations and some presentations right when the lockdown hit. When it comes to difficult times like this, you have to be careful as a leader, because you can't crawl into your shell, and you can't have your company crawl into your shell. In fact, with the University of Glasgow, I teamed up with Dr. Nick, and what we did is a meta-analysis of the past downturns and what successful companies did. And so, because we knew I know what I did, and we knew what sounded good, but we wanted to really give the information of what the data said. And so we took, I think, 13 different studies from Harvard, from Cambridge, all these different places. And one of the things is when you are in a downturn or a recovery, you have to keep, for example, investing in sales and marketing. There are places you want to cut, but there's also places that if you cut them, you're going to lose momentum. And so it's not just about, crawling through these times. It's about looking for opportunities, but to look for those opportunities and to take advantage of them, you need cash in the bank. You need to make sure there's a quick return on investment. You can't don't just acquire a company because it's a good deal, because you might spend 2 or 3 years integrating it. And then on the other side, by that time, you've lost any potential gains you can from that type of acquisition. So there are some nuances and some subtleties into the things that companies do through that, and that's been really helped out a lot of organizations to get that info.
That's really good advice. I mean, the cash advice, absolutely so important. And I think so many companies that haven't put that cash aside will really be struggling. I mean, we've been lucky in the UK that there's opportunities to borrow money very cheaply. Obviously, the interest rates are very low, and the sales and marketing piece is so vital. And you're absolutely right. So that's fantastic advice. Thank you. And the fast ROI, that's a really interesting point too. So also earlier on, you talked about the fact that you were awarded best place to work. And I'm thinking at the moment that can't be very easy to create a great culture to work in when many people are working remotely. Many are thinking, will I have a job after we've got a furlough scheme going at the moment at the time of recording? When the furlough scheme finishes, will I be made redundant? Will I lose my job? What's going to happen? There's so much uncertainty. Will there be another? Can you possibly create a great environment to work in with all of this stuff going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of talk about vulnerability and transparency in leadership, but it has to be in a healthy way. And I'll give you an example. I was coaching a business owner a couple of years ago, and his industry went into recession. And they were having growth for the last 10 years. They had great growth. And so he was this high flying CEO. And then all of a sudden, they really needed to pull back. They couldn't spend money like they could. He was worried he would have to do layoffs. And he was getting ready. He was getting prepared to do an all company meeting. And I said, well, what are you going to tell everybody out there? He said, well, I'm going to tell people everything's great. I don't want them to worry. I'm like, do they know that there's problems in the industry? He goes, well, yeah, of course. It's an industry-wide thing. They know who our competitors are. They see the news. It's no secret. I said, well, what do you think is going to happen when you tell them everything's great? He's like, oh, they're probably not going to believe me. They probably think they're going to get fired. He said, well, what do I do? And so I worked with him. And so when the all-company meeting came, he came up there, and you could tell there was a tension in the air. And he said, look, everybody, I got to be honest with you. We've had some really, really good years out there, but it's a real problem for us in our industry right now. And so we're going to have to really make some changes around here. And he said, as soon as he delivered that, it's like everybody breathed a sigh of relief, because he addressed the elephant in the room right off the bat. But you can't be vulnerable as a leader without showing a way out. So he said, look, everybody, it's my intention to get through this without doing any layoffs. And to be honest with you, I can't even guarantee that. But what I want to do is work with you so we can get through this as best as we can for everybody. And he really made it a rallying cry. And so what happened is some people, like, for example, there was a lady in shipping, and she said, hey, I just had a grandkid. I can go down to 20 hours a week and half my salary. The people in the accounting department said, you know what, we don't need new computers. We're going to get new computers. We can make do with the old ones for a couple more years. And he said it was amazing because everybody got behind it, because he was courageous enough to put it out there. But that's what healthy vulnerability is. Hey, we're having problems and we're going to get through it. So you always got to show them the direction that you're going to go in. And I think that's a really important point for leaders to take back.
And do you know what? That's such a great example, because if he had gone in saying exactly as you said, everything is great, they probably would have wanted to buy the new computers and had an argument. The lady who, probably wouldn't have cut her hours. It is such a good thing to say, look, we are in it together in a way. We're going to find our way out of it together. That's really great. So what about you personally, Michael? How have you adapted to this new virtual world? How are you able to deliver value to your audiences, to your customers, when you're helping them with their leadership? How do you do that?
Yeah, Maria, I'm a bit nerdy. And so I went back and I did some research studies, and I found out there's 4 different types of leadership, of leaders out there. And I've also developed a quick quiz. It's an 8 question fast quiz because I know everybody's busy out there. And to me, especially when we're doing things virtually, I really love interactivity, because my goal whenever I present is for that leader to go back and the next day change something that they do for the positive, so that their team's more productive, they're a stronger leader, and it benefits the company. And so what I've been doing is I have this quiz. So everybody that's going to attend the presentation, they take the quiz beforehand. So they get this scorecard of what they are like as a leader. So they get this printable scorecard. So they know their strengths, their motivations, why they do what they do, and where their blind spots are. And then during the presentation, I go and I take my little whiteboard and I talk about all the different it's because we're getting too much PowerPoint. So it's a little bit fun. I'm on my thing, I'm making jokes, etc. And they get to learn not just about their leadership type, but how they interact with all the other ones. Because it's one thing to know about you, but if you're second in command, what's her personality type and how do I best talk to her? And it gets to be really fun. And then if the client wants a breakout, when we get in the breakouts, they get to debrief with the other leaders, the other people in their team, to really integrate, to really ground that into their knowing. And then when they leave and the feedback's been off the charts, they're like, oh, I finally know how to deal with this person in the other division. And so when they leave that presentation, they have actionable things that they know about themselves. They have greater awareness of themselves, a greater awareness how to communicate to other people in their organization, and it's fun and interactive, and it's really been fun to deliver and really been well received.
That's really great. I love that. And what's interesting is that the thread going through all of this is sort of really understanding yourself and being aware of yourself. And with that, you help them to do that, and so that they can be better. And you said earlier, you had fun because you learned who you were and you understood you're not mirroring somebody else. You're not modeling somebody else. You are you, but the best you can be. Love all that. Love all that. Listen, our time has rapidly run out. So I would like to end on another on a fun question. Something else we have in common, right? We like gadgets. I suspect you have a new gadget that you're going to want to show me that make me jealous. What have you bought recently?
All right. Well, I just turned 50, Maria, and I just got VR. It's the new Oculus. And what this is a computer, and you put it on, and it's a virtual reality. So I play games. I played the zombie game as the last one. So I'm shooting all these zombies, and I'll tell you, Marie, next time we see each other, I'll bring it, because when you put it on, you are literally in a new world. And actually, when it comes to presentations, it might be even really interesting to see how that might be in 5 or 10 years of how people might be experiencing this, because when you put it on, you're literally in another world. I mean, you can't, if I put it on and I move my hand, I couldn't even see what's in front of me. I can see, I'm in the Alps, or I'm in the Old West, and it's really immersive, but it also gives a little bit of a glimpse of where we're going with some experiences.
Right, well, 2 things on that. Firstly, I suspect it will be quicker than 5 or 10 years. And secondly, I do not want to be involved with any zombies. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So, Michael, thank you so much.
Yes. It's been a real pleasure, Marie, and we have known each other for a while. It's been really great to have this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.